Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic 90s nerds to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, we talk about everything from Nickelodeon slime to horror movie slashers, but plenty of stuff in between. Today's video is a wrap-up video where I'm going to tell you guys all about what I read in flippin' April. I'm so excited. I've got stats and I've got star ratings ready to go. So without further ado, right after the short intro, we'll come right back and we'll dig in to all the books. Welcome back, guys! I'm so excited to talk about everything that I read in April, but before we get into the books, let's just talk about some general April stats about all the things I accomplished in April. And in case you guys didn't know, April was my big readathon and watchathon extravaganza, which I called Old School April, and it wasn't just me who was involved in this extravaganza. A lot of you guys joined in too, and thank you so much. It really means a lot that so many people participated and joined in. It was a freaking blast, and I'm so excited. And guys, I have officially decided that yes, Old School April will be an annual event. So woo! I hope you guys are happy about that. Please comment below if you are excited and if you think that is a great idea to have this as an annual thing. But did I only do Old School April? No, bitch! I actually did another readathon. I also participated in GabbyReads and Olivia Reads a Latte, their readathon called Spring Fling a Ween. So I'm pretty proud that I was not only able to do my own readathon and watchathon, but participate in somebody else's readathon as well, all in the same month. So some more things that I was able to accomplish in April, which I'm really happy about. I filmed and edited and released 4 different Old School April themed vlogs, which I'm so proud of. I really loved the way my vlogs came out. Oh, very excited. Not only did I do that, I also did a collab video, which was all about Are You for the Dark? And I got different content creators to come on and give me a clip about suggestions of books and movies that people could either read or watch that fit the vibe of certain Are You for the Dark episodes. So I'm very proud of how that came out as well. That was a ton of fun, and I really want to thank everyone who joined in and participated in that collab as well. Thank you guys so much. I really am happy with how it turned out. I had a couple of live stream book discussions. I built a Lego set, and it was specifically a Seinfeld Lego set, which was very thematic for Old School April because Seinfeld, back in the 90s, that's when it was from, and it was basically, the Lego set is Jerry's apartment, and also it had the 4 main Seinfeld characters. They were also included in the set, but also Newman, who is my favorite Seinfeld character. He's kind of a side character, obviously. He's not one of the main 4 people, but I love Newman. Anyway, I had a lot of fun building that Lego set, but it took forever. I also colored 2 90s themed coloring pages. One was a Furbies coloring page and one was a Beanie Babies coloring page. I didn't mean to do both pages like thematic about 90s toys. It just happened that way, but it was really fun. I was able to watch some movies as well as listen to some audiobooks while coloring, so that was awesome. And that is all included in my vlog, by the way. Those coloring pages and my building of the Lego set, all of that are part of different vlogs that I released in April. Also, I was able to watch a total of 64 different things, so different movies and episodes of TV shows, but it totaled to be 64 things. Oh my god, I can't even believe it. I did say in my last vlog that it was 65 things, but actually I miscounted. It was 64 things total. That's the official number, and it is accurate. As I already teased, I did the 2 readathons, my own readathon where I read things from 2002 and earlier. So everything had to be at least 20 years old or older for my readathon. That was like my criteria. I also had a list of 9 prompts, which I accomplished all of them. And then Spring Fling Ween, as I mentioned, that had 3 prompts. 2 of the prompts were bookish related, and the 3rd prompt of Spring Flingoween was baking / like dessert related. So I did all 3 of those prompts for Spring Flingoween, and that is in my Spring Flingoween thematic vlog. So if you're more interested in what I made in terms of baking, you could check that out. Also, I listened to 3 thematic podcast episodes during the month of April. One was a podcast episode from my favorite podcast, the Big Orange Couch podcast. That was a 1999 year in review episode where they talked about everything from 1999, you know, popular movies, popular TV shows, popular books, all kinds of things. So that was really well produced, like all their episodes are. I do recommend that podcast very much. The other podcast I listened to 2 episodes of the Splat Attack podcast, and one of the hosts of the Splat Attack podcast is Brett Wilson, a good friend of mine who I really, really enjoy his thoughts on 90s Nickelodeon and the 90s in general, but he's also a fantastic artist, and he was a part of my Are You Afraid of the Dark collab that I mentioned earlier. So yes, Brett is awesome, and his podcast is fantastic. I listened to 2 episodes of that while I was building Legos. So yeah, good stuff. So 3 total, basically 90s themed podcast episodes I listened to. Lots of fun there. So I also wore thematic clothing. This is the only shirt I didn't wear, and I'm wearing it for this wrap up now. But yes, I wore thematic clothing every single day in April. A lot of it was 90s Nickelodeon themed clothing, but some of it was like I had an E.T. shirt, I had a Beanie Baby shirt from when I was actually a kid. Like these clothes were items I owned as a kid and I still somehow have and still somehow fit into. Also, I had like an NSYNC sweatshirt. I had like a Ferris Bueller's t-shirt, all kinds of random different things. So it wasn't all 90s Nickelodeon, but yes, I had tons of thematic clothing I wore every single day, and I also wore thematic earrings, which I'm also doing today. So these are Rescuer earrings. If you've ever seen the movie The Rescuers, there's also The Rescuers Down Under. This is Bernard and Bianca. They're the 2 little mice main characters from those movies, and those are Disney movies. I did not watch this for Old School April, but I just wanted to wear them, and they are old school since those movies are older. They're at least 20 years old or older. So I told you a whole bunch of stats, but let's talk about my reading stats. How many books did I get through in frickin' April? Well, I got through 13 frickin' books. Look at this massive stack. Oh my god, it's so big, and it's very heavy, by the way. I'm very proud of this, and I have specific reading stats to go through with you guys right now that I'm very happy about. Oh! Alright, so 13 total books, as I said. 12 of the books were horror, or I guess YA thrillers were some of the books, and 1 book was I would describe it like a general fiction book, and we'll get into that. Out of the 13 total books, 4 of those 13 books were audiobooks. So I physically read some of the books, 9 to be precise, and 4 I listened to on audio. However, 2 of the 4 audiobooks I read along with the book as I listened to it. So I visually looked at 11 books. So that means I read 11 books in terms with my eyes. And 2 of the audiobooks I did not read along with the audio. So 2 of the audiobooks is just listening. I was doing other things, and we'll talk about which books those were as we go on. So I'm only counting the 11 books that I read with my eyes when I'm giving you this amount. I'm about to tell you the page count. So this page count only includes 11 of the books. I'm not including the 2 books I only listened to on audio. So I read a total of 2,285 pages. Now that sounds like a ton, but keep in mind that a few of my books were middle grade and a few of my books were vintage YA. So keep that in mind that they might be 100, 130, 134 pages long, but those are pages that have bigger font and that are not difficult to read books. So, you know, take that how you will. I don't know how to kind of gauge, is that impressive when you're considering so many books were middle grade and young adult. These pages, I guess, you know, it's not like intense pages, all of them, but whatever. So let's talk about, you know, how things fall in terms of adult versus middle grade versus young adult. So out of the 13 books I read, 4 of the reads were middle grade books, and that includes 3 Are You Afraid of the Dark books and 1 Goosebumps book, and I will get into talking about each of those in a second. And then I had 3 vintage young adult books, so that's not too bad. So that's a total of 7 kind of younger books, younger geared books, whatever. And then 6 adult books, which is still pretty darn good in my opinion. I am a slow reader, so this is a great reading month for me. In fact, it ties my best ever reading month, which was January of this year, where I also read 13 books. But that month I read, I'm sure I read middle grade in that month too, but I also read a lot of novellas in January. Alright, so let's talk about star ratings real quick. So out of the numbers of stars I had 2 books which I rated 5 stars. I had 3 books that I rated 4.5 stars. I had 3 books that I rated a flat 4 star. And I have 3 books that I rated 3.5 stars. And finally, I have 2 books that I rated a flat 3 star rating. And let's go through them right now. But let me put this big ass stack down before I drop it and you guys hear stuff falling and then my books will be destroyed. So I'm gonna put it down and then we'll dig in book by book. Okay, let's start off with my middle grade books. As you guys can see, these are the 4 middle grade books I read. Alright, so as I mentioned, 1 Goosebumps, and the Goosebumps book I read was The Haunted Mask, which I had never read, which is absurd. It's an atrocity. It's terrible, I know. I actually have a reading vlog where I document myself reading this and doing a whole bunch of other things too. So check out the vlog. All my April vlogs will be linked below. And as I said before, I am very proud of the vlogs. And if you guys like vlogs, which you seem to like, because I asked people recently, what kind of videos do you want to see more of on my channel? And people were like, vlogs, bitch! So I was like, okay, vlogs. So I'm actually working on a vlog right now, starting today, that has to do with like zombie books and zombie movies, but also Friday the 13th. So anyway, stay tuned for that. That's something on the horizon coming up. But in terms of this book, oh my god, it was so much fun. I had a blast reading it. And I had seen the episode of The Haunted Mask, which is a 2-parter. They packaged it together as a movie in the 90s. So I had seen that many, many times growing up, but I had never read it. And it did not disappoint me. I gave this a 5-star rating because it was so good. So before I had read this, my other favorite Goosebumps book was Welcome to Dead House. I love that book. I think it's a great Goosebumps book. However, this one, I liked it just as much as Welcome to Dead House, and I almost think that those 2 books are tied for my favorite now. So this one, along with Welcome to Dead House, are now my 2 official favorite Goosebumps that I've read so far, or reread, because it's been a while from the Goosebumps books that I actually did read. I only read a few as a kid, but I'm rereading those too. I'm trying to do a whole Goosebumps project this year, and I'm making my way slowly through. I'm not going in complete order. I am for the most part, but sometimes I'll skip around, like this one was not next up, but I just skipped to it because I thought it would be perfect for old school April, and it did accomplish one of my prompts, which was read any Goosebumps book, and I chose this one because it has been far too long for me to wait to have read this. So I'm so glad it's now checked off my list, and it was worth the wait. So good. So wonderful. Definitely recommended if you like Goosebumps, or if you like kind of, you know, getting in touch with that inner child and reading some middle grade every now and then. Next up, we're going to talk about the 3 Are You Afraid of the Dark books that I read. I also had a vlog where I documented myself reading these. And the first one I read was The Tale of the Terrible Toys. I do want to preface this whole review of these 3 Are You Afraid of the Dark books with, I read an Are You Afraid of the Dark book about 2 to 3 years ago. It was called The Tale of the Zero Hero, and I did not like it. I didn't think it had the vibe of an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, so my opinion of Are You Afraid of the Dark books was not a high opinion going into reading these 3. But I wanted to determine, was it just that one book, or are all the Are You Afraid of the Dark books really, really bad? So I went into this one kind of tentatively, not sure if I was going to enjoy it or not, but guess what, guys? I did very much end up enjoying this. It was a lot of fun. It felt more like an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode compared to the other one I had read previously years ago. It definitely matched the vibe and tone of the show, and it had a spooky flair. Basically, we're following our main character, Carter, who discovers these toys in his attic, and they come to life. And you know, Carter's a very lonely kid, and so he's really happy to have this group of toys who are basically like his new friends. So he's not lonely anymore. However, bad things start to befall people he knows, and he starts to wonder, are the toys at fault? Are these toys really innocent in what they seem? So yes, that's kind of like the mystery behind everything. Very fun. I gave this a 4-star rating. The next Are You Afraid of the Dark book that I read in April was The Tale of the Souvenir Shop. And I will say, so this was my least favorite Are You Afraid of the Dark book. In terms of the ones that I read in April, I didn't like it. I just thought that it felt more sci-fi. The story was completely bonkers out there. It didn't make sense. It was convoluted. I mean, I thought that the cover was so cool. I mean, look at this cover. So I was like, how could this go wrong? I mean, is it like a haunted souvenir shop? Do the things in the shop come alive? Are people like trapped inside of the toys in the shop or something? Or the souvenirs, whatever. It really didn't go that direction. It went into a far left direction. I don't even know what to say. because it doesn't even hint at the back of the book what actually does start to occur in the book. So yeah, not my favorite, just did not feel like an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode at all, did not capture what I was looking for. It felt like it could have just been any random middle grade book, and I found myself looking and checking how many pages I had left, so that tells me I didn't really enjoy it. I gave this a 3-star rating. So again, my lowest rated books were 3 stars. So I had 2 books that I rated 3 stars. This was one of them. What other book that we're going to talk about today also received a 3? You'll have to wait and see. But yes, not my favorite in terms of the whole month, and not my favorite Are You Afraid... I can't even talk! And also not my favorite Are You Afraid of the Dark book either. Okay, and the last Are You Afraid of the Dark book that I read for the month of April is The Tale of the Deadly Diary. And this theme of stories coming to life, or books being kind of menacing, or stories being menacing, that was a little mini theme that ran through my entire TBR for the month of April. Not every single book, but more than one book had this kind of theme of a book is more than it seems, a book can be dangerous, and I really like that trope, you could say, in horror. That trope is awesome, and I personally really like it. So this one was awesome. Out of all the Are You Afraid of the Dark books that I read, not only this month, but in total, so that would be out of 4 Are You Afraid of the Dark books that I've ever read, this one felt the most like an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode out of all of them. And this one, they actually mentioned the character Dr. Vink, so it's like, wow, like they actually had a character from the show in this book. So that really made it fit the vibe of the show even more. By the way, my friend Cameron from Library Macabre, check out his channel, he buddy read The Tale of the Terrible Toys with me. He didn't read the other 2 with me, but he also read The Tale of Cutter's Treasure, and he told me that I have to read that one, that one's really, really great. So keep that in mind, guys, if you're looking for Are You Afraid of the Dark books. That one is also similar to an episode. In fact, there's an episode with the same title, and Cameron says it's a lot like that episode in book form, and it was really well done. So I'm excited. I do have that one. Let me grab it and I'll show you the cover of it. So I am going to read that one at one point, I just haven't yet, but let me show it to you. Okay, so here we have The Tale of Cutter's Treasure, and this is the one that Cameron said is really, really awesome. So I will keep that in mind, and next time I decide to dip into some Are You Afraid of the Dark books, this will be my next one for sure. And I'll also watch the coinciding, I guess that's a word, the episode that coincides with this. Okay, so that was all my middle grade reads. Now let's talk about my YA reads, which I have 3 right here. Alright, so 3 total. And first, let's talk about The Thrill Club. The Thrill Club was a book I was thinking I was not going to get to in the month of April. It was on my original TBR list, but I was getting near the end of April when I was celebrating Spring Fling Halloween, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to finish my whole TBR. There's just no way. However, I was able to get to it because I listened to this one on audio. I did not read along physically with the audiobook. However, I do own a physical copy, and you could see it's not very long. Text is not too small. So these are so easy to read, no matter if you listen to them or physically read them. Fear Street books, they're so fun, simple, breezy, and this had some darkness to it, and it had a cool story. So similar to The Deadly Diary, there is this group who meet to discuss like scary stories that they make up, and they read their stories to each other. They call themselves the Thrill Club, and I really like that because it kind of matched a tone of a different book I'm going to talk about in a second. But the Thrill Club was fun in that, just like The Deadly Diary, you know, these stories that they tell aren't really safe because bad things start to befall the people, just like in the stories. So it's almost like, are the stories coming to life? How is this happening? Bad things are taking place around these stories type of deal. But you know, there's always kind of like a human element to Fear Street books, but sometimes there's more than that going on. So yeah, this had like a whole bunch of elements going on at the same time. I guessed what was going to take place and happen. That did not hinder my enjoyment. I still had a great time, and yeah, very fun, totally recommend. Again, not my favorite Fear Street read, but still not a bad one either. And I have a lot more Fear Street to catch up on, but I was glad I was able to kind of check another one off my list and to put another one in the done pile. So this one I think I rated it a 3.5, right? Yes, a 3.5 star rating. I'm going to wind up rounding it up for Goodreads. Next up, I read a point horror book, and this was also for Spring Fling Halloween. So the Thrill Club was part of my Spring Fling Halloween. It wasn't originally on the TBR for that, but it just happened to be in my vlog for Spring Fling Halloween. This one was also in the vlog, and I read this one physically, and it was so much fun. Lots of tension in terms of there's this babysitter, she's all alone, like watching this cute little boy, and she starts to get spooked out when she hears things, you know, outside around the house. And there's also all these reports of attacks on babysitters in the area, so she has reason to be freaked out. And so that makes you as the reader also kind of on edge while you're reading, because you're like, oh my god, is it the attacker? What's going on? And who is the attacker? What's happening? Of course, in this book, there's a tiny bit of romance. That's okay, because in 90s YA, it's never too heavy. It's never over the top. It's easy to stomach, and so that didn't bother me, because I'm not a big romance person, but this was so good. Definitely one of my favorite point horror books that I've read so far. Of course, this is written by R.L. Stine, so a lot of R.L. Stine books kind of in this whole TBR pile, 3 total, I think. So very Steiny April, if you want to call it that. I did make up the word Steiny in my other April vlog, and I was like, it's been a Steiny afternoon, because I was reading all kinds of R.L. Stine that day, and so I'm just going with it, and I'm going to use it as like an adjective from now on. So yes, a Steiny April, and it's been wonderful, because I really do like his writing style, whether it's middle grade with Goosebumps, or young adult or old school young adult with point horror and Fear Street. It's always a good time. So this I gave a 4-star rating because it was definitely one of the better point horror books I read. Some tension, and I had an inkling about, you know, who is at fault for stuff, but I didn't completely guess. So that also always is a good thing when I can't completely figure out what's going on. And next up, this book was so good. It was so freaking good. I'm gonna tell you guys, you know, my least favorites at the end and all of this and that, but right now I just want to kind of go through the books in general. This was The Midnight Club, and this is the one that I kind of said was a general fiction read. I definitely wouldn't consider it a horror book or even a thriller book. I would say if you go into this expecting to be scared or creeped out or some kind of horror vibe, you might wind up being disappointed. However, I knew this was going to be a sad book going into it, and so I was not disappointed. So this essentially, it's a group of teenagers who are at a hospice, and they gather around at midnight around a fire in this room, and they start to tell stories, and the stories are a way to cope with their illnesses, because they all have terminal illness. And it's really, really sad and heart-wrenching, but it's also uplifting and powerful and marvelous. I also read this for Spring Fling Halloween because one of the prompts was read a book with yellow or pink on the cover. This obviously has yellow, and yeah, so magnificent. I will never forget this book. And just to give a tiny bit of backstory and to get a little personal, because this book meant a lot to me, and it's because of a certain reason. My uncle passed away like a month and a half, 2 months ago from terminal cancer that we literally just found out about in January of this year. And all of a sudden they're like, he only has a few months to live. And so that really hit me so hard, and it's been a really rough couple of months. You guys might have seen I posted a GoFundMe on my community tab for my uncle that, you know, his family started, his closer family started, and it was all to help with his medical expenses so that he didn't have to go to a hospice. It was like the hospice came to him. So thank you to anyone who donated to that. That really means a lot. And even though he's since passed away, all the funds went to helping, you know, him have care at home, which was really important for him and gave him good quality of life at the end of his life. And I'm trying not to get emotional about it right now. It's very hard. Like, I am on the verge of like getting emotional, but I'm going to try not to, because I don't want it to be a sad thing. This kind of helped me cope with that, if that makes sense. So like this had like such a special personal meaning to me. I can feel it happening right now. It's about to happen. So I'm going to stop talking about this in a second, but this was a 5-star read. So good, and helped me just cope with how someone could know that they're going to pass away but be okay with it. Because my uncle also, he had like a very good outlook of that. I don't know how. I was like flabbergasted, like how can you get this diagnosis and like still continue to live on until, you know, the inevitable happens. And so I just, because I knew what this was about, I was like, I have to read this. Like maybe it will give me something that will be comforting, you know, maybe like, you know, it will help me put myself in the mindset of my uncle. But like, you know, if obviously he's not in the same mindset as these kids, but it was a better way to think of it than, you know, how I was thinking about the whole situation before. So this is going to mean a lot to me forever. And again, thank you to anyone who donated to his GoFundMe. Benjamin, Cameron, I know a few other people too. Thank you so much. Like, it means a lot. I can't even tell you how, thoughtful that was and how much that meant to my family, that my uncle could be comfortable at home. And so this book just holds a special place. So if you guys are looking for something that is important, has a bigger meaning, and yeah, there's some religious undertones, but it's not overly religious heavy in terms of it's in your face. It's not even about any one religion. And so I think that's important too, that it's not like all God, God, God or anything. And my uncle was religious, so I think that helped him personally, which of course I don't fault anyone for being religious. I'm not personally a practicing Catholic, but yeah, I'm glad it helped my uncle. But this is more, it's got some religious undertones, but it's about more than that. And so I do think it's a wonderful book. I can't say enough good things about it, and how it would help somebody, I think, perhaps, who knows relatives who went through this. I will say, though, some people might find it upsetting if they had a relative that went through terminal illness. I found it relatable and helpful for me personally. It just helped me get my mindset around it in a different way, if that makes sense. Okay, now on to lighter things, all my adult books, 6 adult books. And I will say, thanks for letting me get real with you guys. I think it's important to be yourself, to be real, to represent what you're going through. I just am into that. I'm into just being me. So if that's too heavy for you guys, I'm sorry, but my dad's not into showing everything, being who you are. He's like, you might not want to be so personal all the time sometimes, but I think it's okay. I mean, because that's my life. That's my experience, and that's why I related to that book in the way that I did. So I think it's important to know where I was coming from, in terms of how I rated the book and how I felt while reading it. So let's get into these fun adult books. Some were great, some were okay, and we will see right now as I go through them. So first thing I want to talk about is a book which was one of the book club picks for the book club I run. If you guys don't know, if you're new here, I run a book club on this channel called the Midnight Book Society. It is open to everyone and anyone, and we have a Discord channel which is linked below, so if you want to join the Discord, go ahead and click that link. I've got little discussion areas for each book that we read every month, and every month I have 2 book choices, and people can choose to read one, the other, or both, or neither, and decide to join in on a future month instead. But so every month you'll hear me say I have 2 books. This was one of the 2, Ritual, also known under the name Feast by Graham Masterton. And this book was not my favorite, and I go into depth about this, but it does include spoilers. I have a whole live stream book discussion, which was basically like the book club meeting, because after each club read at the end of the month or the beginning of the next month, I have a live stream about it, and that's like our meeting. And so people who read like to join in and chat live in the comments and share their opinions with me, and I share my opinion with them, etc., etc. So if you really don't care about getting it spoiled, or if you've already read it, then go check out that discussion for more thoughts. But for those of you who don't want it spoiled, essentially we've got this freaking idiot, Charlie, who is a restaurant, I guess, reviewer or, restaurant critic, travels around the country, going to different restaurants, deciding which he wants to include in this dining guide that he works for. But on this particular trip he brings his son along, and he has to. He hasn't really spent a lot of time with his son, and he's already complaining about spending the time with his son in the beginning of this book, and that's one thing that makes him annoying. There are a whole bunch of things that make Charlie an annoying character, and that is why I think I had so much trouble getting into this book, and also it felt really long. Now, eventually Charlie and his son run into these cannibals. They don't know it's cannibals, but it's this restaurant, and Charlie's all intrigued about this restaurant, and he thinks it's just like a fancy dining society that's exclusive. However, no, Charlie, you freaking idiot. It's not that. It's a freaking cult of cannibals who are all into self-sacrifice, where people cut off their limbs, and certain members of the cult get to eat the limbs of the other members. So anyway, it's very weird. I will say there's some gory stuff in here, and there's enough that pops up here and there to make it worth reading. I am glad I read it, and I never say don't read a book. I just say be warned going in that this is a little bit long, and it does drag on a tiny bit because of the length, but there are some cool moments, and the end is awesome. The end is what you want to read this for. But yeah, I wouldn't say the characters are the strongest characters ever. That would be my big criticism besides the length. But the ending was a lot of fun, and part of this book takes place in New Orleans, which I found rather amusing and fun because I'm from New Orleans, so I keep reading these horror books that end up having parts, that take place in New Orleans, which I think is really cool because I like seeing local stuff that I can relate to in a book. So this had that, but Yeah, I don't know, Charlie, it was hard to read Charlie sometimes, like, all the women wanted Charlie, inexplicably? Anyway, whatever, you know what I'm trying to say, I cannot pronounce things. Some reason, all these women wanted Charlie, and I don't know why, because he was really just a fool, and everything he thought he could try to infiltrate this cult didn't work. And the whole reason he's trying to get into the cult is because the cult gets a hold of his son, and so the son is kind of, you know, into the cult, and Charlie's like, I want my son back all of a sudden, even though I didn't want anything to do with him in the beginning. So anyway, I gave this a 3 stars. Not my favorite at all. So this was the other book I gave a 3-star rating to. So that means this book and The Tale of the Souvenir Shop were my 2 lowest rated books of the whole month of April. But again, this is a classic paperback from hell type of read. So if you're intrigued, I'd say pick it up. Don't let me dissuade you. Judge it for yourself. I'm always a big proponent of that. Reading it and making your own decision. The next book that I read for April, which was an adult book, Book of the Damned, so good, oh, so good. This is by D.A. Fowler. It's another paperback from hell type of book, and this was so much fun. This was the second pick of my book club, so we have a live stream discussion up on my channel right now. I was joined by the lovely Alex, the Bookubus. Her channel is amazing. Check out her channel. I will link it below. She joined me live. She was the first ever co-host to any of my book club chats I've ever had, so thank you so much, Alex. I buddy read this with her during the month of April, and we used this app called Voxer. She told me about this app. I had no idea it existed. It's like a walkie-talkie app where you're like, yo, this is what I think about the book. Yeah, and then it sends the message, and then the person sends you, hey, yeah, I think this about the book. And so we basically read certain chapters per day, and then we would check in with this app at the end of the day with like a little voice message, and it was so much fun. What a great way to read a book together. So yeah, I think I will totally want to do buddy reads like that in the future. If anyone else ever wants to buddy read with me, I will suggest Voxer. It doesn't always have to be that way, but I think it's a good way to avoid spoilers. So the premise of this book, essentially, I'm going to go into this very rough because I've got this whole discussion up on my channel, but it does have spoilers. So for those of you who don't want the spoilers, our main character's name is Rosalind. We're following her, and she starts to experience these weird, almost hallucinatory visions to where it's almost like she's living this experience, but it's a different person. So she's experiencing all this stuff. She feels like she's living this character Caroline's life, and she's like just trapped in a room with no windows, no exits, no doors, and she's getting tortured. So Rosalind thinks this is actually happening to her. She's almost like experiencing the pain, but it's really just like all in her mind. And so then she gets these snaps back into reality, and she's like, what is going on? I don't understand. Why am I, like, having these visions of another person's life? What is up? Well, come to find out, it's the plot of the last horror book she read that she's experiencing. And she's like, what the hell? Why am I living out a book in my mind? Like, why am I going through this? Why am I almost being transported into the book, you know, in my mind? But I'm feeling all the pain like it's a real thing. So it's just really crazy to figure out why this is happening. We also follow a detective who's trying to investigate this, and, you know, stuff that's happening in the book is causing stuff to actually happen in real life, and so it's this whole big thing. I definitely recommend this if you like books about books, and this is one of those tropes I discussed. Kind of reminds me of The Tale of the Deadly Diary, kind of reminds me of The Thrill Club in a way, but this is a lot different to where, you know, it's about literally people who read a book, and the book is called Book of the Damned, and if you read it, it's like you're damned. So it's really cool in terms of bad things start to befall the people who read the book in this book. Wonderful stuff. I gave this a 4.5-star rating. It had a lot of dark humor. There was some bleakness to it. I would say it's a wild ride. Like, you know, if you like twisted horror and twisted humor too in your horror, I'd say this has you covered. It's got great body horror as well. Just a good time overall, and I'm so excited to check out more of D.A. Fowler's work. So yes, hopefully I can finish the other book I have by her, which I started last year on audio, was What's Wrong with Valerie, and I'm hoping to finish that this year. Next up, I read The Dark Half by Stephen King. This was one of the books I read for my Year of King reading project with my friend Kat. If you guys are new here, you might not know, my friend Kat and I do a lot of content together here on my channel. She's always appearing in my videos, and we've been doing this thing where we read a Stephen King short story or book each month of the year of this year, 2022, and we also watch the accompanying adaptation, or in some cases there's more than one adaptation. So we watched the movie The Dark Half, and we read The Dark Half, and then we discussed it in a live stream chat together. We do talk spoilers, but if you've already read the book and you've already seen the movie, then go check out our chat for more in-depth thoughts. So this book is a little difficult to talk about. It's hard to describe, essentially. Essentially, we're following this writer named Thad Beaumont, who also has written under a different name, George Stark. And that becomes important later, but essentially, all these crimes start to happen, and people are like, has Thad Beaumont killed people? Because Thad Beaumont's, like, fingerprints are at the scene of the crime and stuff. So anyway, a lot of other things go down, and then you get to the end of the novel and you discover what's going down and what's happening. So I can't really give too much away. This has been described as a hidden gem type of Stephen King book, as an underrated Stephen King, I should say. And I do think that this one was a very enjoyable Stephen King book. I loved the first half of this book. Then when I picked it back up for the second sitting where I sat down to read more of it, and I half read, half listened on audio. Essentially, basically what I mean is I listened on audio, but I also, turned every single page as I was listening. So half read, half listened, but I did fully both things. But this was a good time. The first sitting, I was like, yeah, I can't wait to see what happens. I was really eager to pick it back up, and then the second time I picked it back up, then it felt like it dragged a little bit. So because of that, I didn't give it a perfect 5-star rating. I think it could have been a little bit shorter by maybe 100 pages. So I'm giving this a 4.5-star rating, and I'm rounding it down for Goodreads. Still enjoyable, still recommended, lots of fun. The movie I didn't like so much. I liked the book better, for sure. As you could see, I marked a lot of passages here, so I definitely thought there were some really great parts and a really awesome line. Stephen King sometimes has the most wonderful sentences. So yeah, lots of good stuff here, and I definitely think if you're a King fan, there's no reason not to pick this up. Next up, I read The Cartoonist by Sean Costello. This is an awesome paperback from hell type of book in terms of look at this cover, incredible, come on guys, you know this is awesome. I freaking love the cover. So I actually read this on Kindle so that I didn't hurt my old school copy, because this is one of my favorite books that I own in terms of the cover, and it was one of my dream books, which before I found it, I didn't think I'd ever run into this book in the wild, but I did. I found this at a used bookstore, I believe in Mississippi last year, and so when I saw it, I was like, oh my god! And I went insane, and I freaked out, and I was really excited. So this was a really wonderful, gem to find in the wild in terms of the cover. I've been wanting to read it for a very, very long time. Finally got to read it in April, and it was good, but it was not as great as I thought it would be. And not all old school horror is good. Some of it is really drawn out and really slow, and a lot of times the cover is way better than the actual story. However, I had high hopes for the story because I heard my friend Leon, I say friend, I have never really talked to him, but a YouTube channel that I very much love, Leon the Paperback Maniac. He's got a channel, it's called Paperback Mania, and he talked about this book as one of his favorite books of a certain year. I can't remember if it was 2018, 2019, I don't know, but I was really excited to read it because of that. And so I do think there were parts that were wonderful in this book, but there was a little bit of a drawn out part where it was almost like an examination of grief, which I felt like could have been condensed a tiny bit. However, for the most part, it was a lot of fun. I think it could have packed a little bit more of a punch overall, though. So I gave this one overall a 3.5-star rating. I'm going to round it up for Goodreads. So the premise.
16 years ago, Scott Bowman and his friends accidentally committed a terrible crime. Bound by silence and guilt, none of them ever suspected that there was one other who knew their secret sin, one driven by foul, twisted passions and malignant fury, one who could create nightmarish drawings of unearthly terrors, visions that could come true. Now a successful psychiatrist, Scott regards the strange new patient at his hospital as just a medical oddity, a near helpless old man with an eerie artistic ability, but soon the good doctor's curiosity will draw him into Shadowland of unnerving accidents and horrifying deaths.
So yeah, sounds wonderful, and parts are wonderful and entertaining, but there are other parts where, like a lot of old school horror, it drags. And it could have been a little bit tighter, a little bit more compact. But yeah, I'm glad I read it. I never really regret reading, especially an old school book, because sometimes it's like, it's so good to have this opinion of it because there's not a lot of reviews out there. So I think the more people who read old school books, the more opinions could be shouted out about the books. But again, I recommend you guys checking it out. It is on Kindle. Very easy to find a new copy of it in terms of like a digital copy you could read right now. You don't have to find the very rare old school copy to read it. And I'd say, yeah, if you're interested, check it out. I do like the idea of somebody drawing things and then bad things happening. Very, very cool premise. Next up, I read Moonbane, and this one I technically listened to, so I didn't read along, even though I have a physical copy that I'm holding right here. I listened to this whole thing on audiobook, and I was kind of coloring and doing other things while I was listening. This is a lot of fun. It could have even been better, but still, like, a marvelous good time. There was a little bit of, like, a survival type of element to it in terms of these last few people around in the area have to figure out how to survive and, you know, what they're gonna do, how they're gonna eat, how they're gonna fend off creatures. That is not my favorite thing in books sometimes, but the thing that makes up for it is there's this meteor that crashes, and instead of like something like the Blob coming out, because you know that's the premise of the Blob, there's a meteor that crashes and this goo comes out and it starts attacking people and growing. Instead of that happening, the meteor cracks open, these creatures are released. If you're bit by the creature, you turn into this werewolf type of creature. And so this one guy is chilling with his wife and son, yada yada. The son and the dad go for a walk, and all of a sudden, they see this meteor and shit goes to hell. Stuff goes down. Not very good stuff. People all around start turning into werewolves, and it's not good. It's not safe all around. So one person survives, they find other survivors, and they're like,
what are we gonna do? We're gonna have to freaking find a way to, go to the moon, and these werewolves, are they from the moon? What's going down?
I don't want to give too much away, but it's just kind of some absurdity. What I loved about this book was the beginning and the end. The middle part, not as much. Like I said, the survival part, I'm like, whatevs, I'm over it. But the ending, I loved the ending. I would say the ending is why I rated it the way I did. So I gave this one a 3.5. I'm going to round it up for Goodreads. And the only reason I'm rounding it up instead of down is because of the end. I really just enjoyed the ending. It was my kind of ending. I'm not going to give away if it was a good ending, like a happy one, or a sad one. Anyway, it was marvelous in terms of the theme and the idea of it. Very quick, easy read. Like the audiobook was so short. It was like 2 hours long. I was listening at double speed, but even if you decided to read the physical copy, which this is also, I think, available in like a Kindle version and also like a new edition paperback, this is only 196 pages. Super short. Why not pick it up and check it out for yourself, especially if you like werewolf type of books. I think this would be right up your alley, totally your jam. A good time. Not without its flaws, like a lot of the books I'm talking about today, but still worthwhile. And finally, the last book I read for the month of April, and this was actually a reread for me, The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. And I knew I liked this book because I read it many years ago. This time around, I read this for Spring Flingoween, and I just randomly shoved it on my TBR at the very last moment. I listened to this on audio, but I also read along with this physical copy I just bought, and it was a ton of fun to revisit this. I will say, the very first time I read this years ago, I remember loving it. Like, I think if I even rated books back then, which I didn't, but like, say I would go back and try to determine what I would give this in terms of a star rating, I would have given it a 5 back then. Revisiting it now, I still loved it. I still think it's amazing, but I'd probably give it like a 4.5 rounded up. And that is what I'm going to officially rate it now. I don't know why I didn't like it as much as the first time. I think it's because, the movie Hellraiser, which is based off of this book, I just love. It's my favorite horror movie of all time, and so I have a very special place in my heart for that movie. And so the whole time while I was listening and reading this, I kept comparing it to the movie, and it's hard not to do that if you love the movie. And I think the movie did some parts better than the short story or novella. So overall, still wonderful. Clive Barker's prose is just elegant, but also gory and graphic at the same time. It's like a weird yin and yang, but somehow it works together. It's like very graphic, visceral, like disturbing words and imagery, but like written in an elegant way. It's very strange, but it works. Clive Barker's marvelous. So yeah, I loved it, but I didn't love it as much as the first time. So 4.5. So again, I gave 2 books 5 stars and 2 books 3 stars. So the 2 I gave 5, The Haunted Mask, which is a Goosebumps book, and The Midnight Club. Those were favorites, but I would say my very, very favorite book of the entire month had to be The Midnight Club by Christopher Pike. For the reasons I talked about earlier, it had a lot of personal, emotional meaning to me, specifically. Not everyone may love it as much, but for me, it's what I really wanted from the book and what I kind of needed in terms of like an emotional impact at the time. My least favorite book, most definitely Ritual/Feast. I had high hopes in terms of cannibals, yeah! But no, not my favorite cannibal story. Parts were entertaining. Like I said, the end was marvelous. Not enough to give it a higher rating. There definitely could have been 150 pages omitted, maybe even 200 pages omitted, because it was so long. That definitely took the cake for least favorite, for sure. But again, I would say still read it if you guys are curious and make your own judgments. But yes, what a wonderful reading month. So much progress made. And once again, guys, thanks to all who participated in Old School April, whether it was with the readathon or the watchathon or both. I thank you all so very much. And thanks, guys, for watching this video today. I really, really appreciate it. I know my videos are long, and this one is super long because I had to talk about 13 freaking books. And I didn't even describe all of them in depth, but I think everyone knows what the Hellbound Heart is about, and some of the books I didn't describe, I have other videos up about, like the vlogs talk about a lot of these books in detail as I'm reading them. So, like The Babysitter, I talk about a lot, the Throw Club, the Midnight Club even, the Goosebumps book, the Haunted Mask, all the Are You for the Dark books, I talked about all of those in my vlogs. The Dark Half, I talked about with Kat, you know, and even though there's spoilers, you guys could watch some of the chat if you've already read these things and want to figure out more of my in-depth thoughts on them. So guys, please leave a comment if you've read any of these books. What did you think about them? Do you disagree with any of my ratings? Like, do you love a book that I didn't like, etc., etc.? Did I love a book that you didn't really jive with? I would love to hear about that in the comments. Are there any books that I talked about that you haven't read that you want to read? If so, which ones? Let me know down below. And if you don't mind, please leave a like, because that really helps with the analytics very much, and I would really, really appreciate it. But for this time, guys, that is it for me. Till next time, you guys know what you can do. Keep on killing it.